I'm Scott Snell, the current president, live streaming from the Washington, D.C. area. By the way, there's high winds at my location and also our speaker up in Pennsylvania. So if suddenly this terminates, it's not some conspiracy thing, but an act of God. Anyway, the National Capillary Skeptics is a nonprofit and educational scientific membership organization that promotes critical thinking and scientific understanding. We've been hosting these monthly events free and open to the public since our founding in 1987. Now, some of you hearing the word skeptics in our name may be thinking, oh, great, close-minded.
Okay, so apparently we have lost Scott. Hopefully he will be rejoining us here in a moment. If not, I will introduce Marty for him. Wait a few more seconds here.
Are you
Scott, I think you're back.
surprised that I'm going to continue, all right?
Okay.
Yep, here I go again. So I was saying the word skeptic actually means asking tough questions and following the evidence wherever it may lead us, whether it's where we expected or where we wanted it to or otherwise. One famous skeptic was astronomer Carl Sagan. The phrase extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence comes from him. For example, if I claim to have flown on a magic carpet, evidence before accepting my extraordinary claim. Although in these high winds, perhaps I could have flown on a carpet today. But anyway, our topic tonight is a really interesting case of two contradicting extraordinary claims. One extraordinary claim is that a half century ago, several expeditions of astronauts reached the surface of the moon. The contradicting extraordinary claim is that some or all of those missions were faked. You may be surprised to learn that recent polls of adults in the United States indicate that a sizable percentage are either unsure of whether the Apollo missions were faked or think they probably were faked or definitely were faked. What's the total? 27% of those polled. Especially concerning is that these beliefs are more prevalent among younger generations, those born after 1980. So what can we skeptics do to set the record straight with the public? Fortunately, astronomer Phil Plait has answered the questions of moon landing doubters in his book, Bad Astronomy. We'll post the online version of those answers in the comments section of this video. And by the way, Dr. Plait, we gave him an award several years ago for his public outreach and scientific understanding and critical thinking. Our speaker tonight, on his own initiative, has helped publicize recent evidence supporting the extraordinary claim of astronauts landing on the moon. He's Marty McGuire, an amateur astronomer known online as the Backyard Astronomy Guy. He's also a volunteer who's been trained by NASA to communicate the excitement of NASA's space exploration missions and discoveries with people in his community. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Marty McGuire.
Hey, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. I'm an amateur astronomer by night and a business professional by day. So this is a side gig and just something that's my passion. I'm part of the Solar System Ambassador Program for NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California. And there's about 1,200 of us, over 1,200 of us throughout the U.S. that are volunteers and just love doing public engagement, public speaking, and bringing the excitement of solar system exploration to our local communities. So I do that throughout the year at a couple of different events, and also a co-founder of Lehigh Valley Space Fest. And we just had a fantastic event for that recently at Lafayette College in Easton. So we've got a lot going on here in Lehigh Valley. Really, aside from staring at the stars in my backyard, stumbling onto the Indian Space Research Organization's imagery from their Chandrayaan-2 orbiter that orbits the moon very recently. So stumbling across, some rudimentary instructions somewhere on how to, anyone can download this data publicly available from the ISRO. And I traced my own way into that by, following a couple vague instructions from someone else and really documenting that, what I thought to be documenting it for the first time online, and bringing those images down. And if you've probably already seen some of them, I'll walk us through that process. And there's been multiple news articles that have linked to my processed images that turned a complex process into something that was quite shareable. But this is a repeatable process by anyone, which is the really cool thing. And I'm going to show you how. And I've got a great how-to guide on my website that is hopefully easy to follow, needs a little computer processing power. And we're going to stretch the limits of my Mac, and I'll show you some of this stuff live. In the event that any of the feed or something in my memory kicks out on my laptop for some of this, I do have a pretty comprehensive guide on my website. So without further ado, I'd love to walk you through that process, and I'll share my screen and get into it, if that's okay, Scott?
Sounds good.
Okay. So now we're looking at my site. It's at Backyard Astronomy Guy, and on the main menu, I've got the link to Apollo-ISRO. And that brings you to this page where I really, this is the image that was widely shared on social media that I put together. Again, it's full credit to the Indian Space Research Organization. I merely processed the image from their raw to this with very extremely, really only brightness adjustment. And I documented exactly what I did on the site here between the raw images and here for anybody who has questions about that. But again, it's fully repeatable by anyone. I've been linked in the Petapixel magazine, India Today, and numerous other social media sites. So some fun background, a little bit more detail about where this imagery is coming from. The Chandrayaan-2 orbiter, I'm not sure I'm really pronouncing that properly, but that's my best attempt. So apologies if I'm not getting it right. And linked to where I actually had this originally. So the finished images are quite astounding in terms of the detail involved and just what's visible here. The top image is the finished kind of produced processed result of mine. And you can see the landing leg shadows. Again, the sunlight's hitting it from almost probably, I don't know the exact sunlight angle here on the lunar surface, but it's pretty extreme. So we see a pretty long shadow of the Apollo 11 lunar landing module. Again, this is what remains on the lunar surface, and this is photographed April 2nd of 2021. The Apollo 12 lunar module, what's left behind, this was imaged by the orbiter on April 5th of 2021. And I think personally, this one has quite a bit more detail. And one of the fascinating things here is you can see some of these outward tracks, which are actually the remaining boot prints and foot tracks from the astronauts as they're leading away to different sites on the lunar surface from the module. So some pretty fantastic detail here. But let's get into the meat of this. How did I get this done? Where do you get the data? Good thing is I've really kind of walked everybody through exactly the process here. So on April 2nd of 2021, this orbiter takes photos, it didn't look like this when I started with the raw photo or the raw image data, and it's a little complicated on how to get to it. But the image is a 12-kilometer by 3-kilometer grid that is taken in one large raw image. Technically, I'm not sure if it's a series or how they get it, but it's a single image data set that is downloadable from the site. So finding this needle in a haystack is a couple things. Which data file is the right one? And then in this enormous image file, which is thousands of pixels wide by even many more tall, it's almost a 1 gigabyte data image file. That is quite a lot to go through. So the first time I was looking through it, I narrowed down based on vague information from other online sources about which data file contained the landing site. But then I had to go through section by section, literally taking hours until I found the right grid of many thousands of pixels. And the viewing tool that you use to get to this is It's memory intensive, so it takes a lot of computer horsepower to do this. And it's slow to scroll because of just the immense size of this image file. So if anybody's worked with high resolution images, you can know they take a while to load, zoom in, especially if you have limited computing resources like I do. I don't have a supercomputer at the ready here.
By the
So
way, I've had a similar experience as what you just described. I can't emphasize to our listeners, our viewers enough that trying to find this needle in a haystack, as you described it, the moon has got, features on it, but there's very little variation in these colors. Obviously, I'm pretty sure these are monochrome anyway, but you're trying to
you're
find.
breaking up a bit, but I think I got your question was that you're pretty sure they're monochromatic. Yes, they're grayscale images. So I don't have an intimate familiarity with the data set or the technology of the lander, but they do appear to be grayscale only. I don't know that there's any color rendition as part of it.
Right. And it's so
Because
hard.
this is planetary science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so hard to find these things, even when you have a general idea of where they're located. And yeah, full
You
disclosure.
broke up a little bit there, but what was the last thing you said?
The last thing I said was it is so hard, even if you know where to look, to find these.
Yeah, so it took
images
me
are
a
enormous.
while to even get in here. So what I'd like to do is kind of showcase in a quicker view is kind of the before and after. And I'll show, actually, I'll get to the meat in a second about actually opening the file, working with it. But what we're looking at now, this is actually a screenshot I took of the raw file as it presented to my screen. And working with, and I clearly said here, no image adjustments. This is just a screen grab of the raw file as it's presented to me. But obviously wanting to bring out some detail and see some things, the tool I used, and there's many ways to get this done, and it's repeatable by any number of programs that only adjust exposure or highlights. I did that, and I document here the changes I made on this image. No other image alterations except for changing exposure and changing highlights to expose some of the other detail that was hidden in the darker raw image. And that's the process I repeated through here. Everything's documented.
Yeah.
But the tool to do this is called PDFs for Viewer. And it's a freely downloadable tool from online. And on my site, a little further down, I do have a link on where to go grab that. It's a planetary data science tool that many, I guess, space organizations use for planetary science. And it's documented so it seems to be overly complex. It's not just a tool, but what I did was it took a lot of screen grabs of me zooming into the landing site and turned them into an animated GIF here, which is kind of exciting to see. We've got pixel height and width on the sides on the X and Y axis, so we can find the position of the landers in this massive file that's almost 90,000 pixels tall by about 12,000 pixels wide. So I start out wide, zoom in, and it took a while to find this shadow. I'm going through, I felt like an expert trying to look through craters and look for shadows that weren't typical lunar shadows. And I kind of jumped for joy when I finally found it. It was pretty exciting. Finding the needle in the haystack was pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
So Apollo 12's data I have separately here as well. Phenomenal amount of detail about, you can see these, I'm moving my mouse here, but you can see the tracks leading in a couple different directions. And these are the boot prints.
Okay.
We lost you briefly. Your last word was boot prints. We have you back. Yeah, your last words were boot prints.
Okay, I'm back.
Yes.
I don't know, boy, the weather, you called it. The weather is really causing.
It's unusually difficult.
Okay, so back to my screen share. Are we good?
Oh, yes, and you were describing the boot prints up to the northwest of the landing site.
JD or Scott, can you see my screen again?
Yes.
We've lost your audio.
No, I'll
wait till you confirm that you can hear and see me again.
Yep, you're absolutely good. Please continue.
Boy, I wonder if this is my internet here now. I just got an unstable internet connection message here. So I know I can hear the high winds outside here in the Lehigh Valley.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think you probably lost me at Apollo 12. Is that correct?
That's right. You were describing the footpaths to the upper left. Yes. Marty, how are you doing now? Marty, are you able to hear me?
I can hear you now. I'm regaining connection again.
Copy.
Sorry, it's bad connections.
Yeah, this is unusual for us.
Unstable.
Yeah. Conspiracy theorists, please stand down. We're not under attack here for Marty sharing the truth or whatever. It's just a rough night out there. Marty, is there any way to
Yeah, I switched to a backup hotspot connection, so hopefully it's more stable now and off my Wi-Fi. Sorry about that.
That's all right. It's just like NASA. We work through with redundancies, perfectly trained by NASA there.
So I had to bring in Plan B, and that seems to be stable at the moment. So I'll keep this. So I think you might have lost me on Apollo 12. I was basically explaining did you hear me about the footprints and boot tracks walking away from the lander? So that's some pretty fascinating detail here. And we can even see some potential shadows of other objects left behind. I'm not sure if this vertical or horizontal one right here could even be the flag. Someone commented in one of the posts I did looking at photos of the landing site taken by the astronauts in relation to this setup here, that this horizontal shadow here could potentially be even the flag that was left or some kind of instrument. So anybody who's able to cross-reference or triangulate some of the imagery based on other public information sources be fascinating. We see some brighter objects around and some interesting rock formations and things. So I'm sure someone who has a lot more knowledge of the Apollo missions and landing site detail could add a lot of description to some of this. So I have the kind of the animated zoom of this might have shown before or not, but I took screen grabs of each of the raw photos of different zoom levels using this public viewer tool to show just how much of a needle in a haystack this was. But let's get into it. Let's actually go to the ISRO's data archive and how to do this. So you do need to create a free account to do this, but it's an easy sign up process. And once you do, you navigate to their optical high resolution camera section. When I did these screen grabs for the how-to, they have since updated some of the screen colors. The site looks a little different, but the navigation is still the same for how to get to this data. So when we're actually going through here, the first link takes you to the access data. The next section takes you to the optical high resolution camera. And then last is actually getting to the data set where you actually narrow down the days. So based on prior information I got, The photos were taken, the images were taken on April 2nd and April 5. So if you put in a start range of April 2nd, 2021 to 2021-04-06, you'll get April 2nd and April 5th inclusive. And it just takes a little bit of searching from here. You can show there's 18 rows of data. And from my site, if you scroll down just a little bit more, I tell you what the file names are. So Apollo 12 is in this file. And it's easiest to find it based on the 4043. So you can copy paste or find on page with some of this data to locate. Here would be the Apollo 11 file. And their download process. I mean, this server is in India. I've had some issues getting to the site from time to time, but be persistent if you can't get to it. The download file seems to be queued, and it is relatively large. So be a little patient with how long it takes to get. But once you have it down, what I'm going to do is go over to my Finder with actually I've downloaded the imagery. It comes down in a big zip file. The zips are pretty large. The one for Apollo 11 is 556 megabytes, the zip file, and the one for Apollo 12 is just about 650 megabytes down. But when you unpack it, is really where the magic starts happening. Separately, if you don't have the right tool, you're not gonna be able to open any of this. So a next big part of this is this PDS4 viewer. You might ask, what is this program? Why am I using it? I did a little learn more here about this. It's apparently used by many planetary scientists. There's a lot of documentation from NASA and other organizations and colleges or universities who use this kind of data or GIS data for mapping. Basically, it's mapping data on the moon. So there's where to get the file, more about it, but it's not that complex to use with a little bit of. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to this PDS viewer. And when I have this open, it's just this blank window, but I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to navigate to, I'm going to start with Apollo 12's data file, because I think that's I really am fascinated by the tracks left on there. So we're going to navigate to this folder, which I describe in the email on my website. And it's this XML file, which basically is a very small file, but it references this 1 gigabyte .img file, which is where the data is stored. So we're going to open this XML in this PDS4 viewer. And I first get this little pop-up. Minimize some of this other stuff to get this cleaner. You can see my Northern Lights picture from Bethlehem in the background here. So the file, 93,693 pixels tall by 12,000 pixels wide. Pretty large image file. I don't know if anybody's ever worked with that much before, but they're label and table, but I'm going to click on image here. I get this critical warning error. I think this might be, other people have seen this, but it does end up loading. Basically, it might be a memory issue with the display, but if I'm patient and wait for this viewer to populate, we'll see what this looks like in a second. Okay, so if I switch over to this, I get this little window. I'm going to kind of maximize the screen here, give us more view here. And I'm going to enable a couple tools because I've already solved where in this image file, pixel coordinates, the landing site is. Now it's memory intensive program because it's a huge data file. So I'm still waiting for it to resize. And I'm on a current version of a MacBook Pro with a ton of memory. So it's still working hard. All right, so now it's kind of in presentation ready mode. I've learned that I'm going to go to the viewer menu, turn on the X and Y ticks. Just going to take a second to display. And this is going to give me X and Y coordinates on both sides. So still knowing that this file is 12,000 pixels wide, I'm looking at about just over 1,000 pixels wide at the moment. So the tools here are pretty basic in terms of what I can do to navigate. I've got up and down scroll bars and left and right scroll. So knowing on Apollo 12, I need to go about to the position of 9,080 by 56,400, which is documented on my site. I've got to go down a bit and over to the right. And I'm going to just try to guess by moving the scroll bar to get over to about the 9,000 area. And with a little patience, hopefully with enough practice, we'll see if that actually scrolls. It's obviously not scrolling like you're probably used to. So now I'm in the approximate, I can see 9,000. So now I need to go down to 56,400. So on my other axis here, I can see I'm at 47,000. I need to, I'm just going to drag a little bit and see if I got it right. The goal here is to try to center the landing site so I can zoom in more. But should this fail, I can revert back to the screenshots I've already taken. And again, this is the repeatable process. Anybody with a little patience and the computing power is able to do. Looks like I got down to 53,000. I need to keep going a little bit more. 400. So I'm not quite there. And I just got to notice that my internet connection might be unstable. Can you hear me again?
Yes.
Okay, good. So looks like I went down just a little far. So I'm going to go back up one just by clicking up a little bit. And we can start to keep your eyes peeled. We have to look about 9,000 on the x-axis and about 56,400 on the y. So I have to go up just a tad more, maybe once or twice.
By the way, really glad you're doing this because it gives people a sense of how you have to look around. And you're already kind of zoomed in. It isn't like a dot here, but still, it's remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, luckily I knew, and when I found this, I marked the coordinates pretty quickly, so I didn't lose it again. But starting with a wide view, it proved to be fruitless because I really needed to get towards this zoom level or slightly less zoomed to see an obvious shadow of a human spacecraft. So now we can see Apollo 12 landing site coming into view here. I'm going to try to scroll up and center this. You can see all the craters they had to miss. I think Apollo 11 is even more telling with, the stories of Buzz trying to navigate with not much fuel left and avoiding a crater. This really tells the story in just another way from another lander's point of view from another country. So now we've got Apollo 12 centered here. And if I go to the zoom, I'm at zoom 1. Well, let me just go in a bit here. It's going to redraw or now we get in a little closer. Now we start to see a little pixelation. I'm going to go in one more just for fun to zoom level 4. And then we can pan around a little bit on the site. So we do see pixelation at this point. It's hard to get a lot of detail here, but look at the fascinating, you can see lander legs. So you can see the shape of the lunar, is that the ascent module? The lunar ascent module, is that the correct?
Oh, no, descent module.
Lunar descent module. I always get that wrong. Ascent module is what came back.
Yes.
But we can zoom in and out a little bit. This is a hard tool. So what I ended up doing was just screenshotting the raw photo or image as the tool is presenting it to me and adjusting the light, the exposure and the highlights in Photoshop because that was a way I felt that would, without destroying any of the image artifacts or adding anything to it, it merely adjusts the lightness and brightness of items. So I'll repeat that process for here. I'm going to do it, use my screenshot tool. And you can see this is exactly how I did it. I'm just going to put this to clipboard, capture it. And I'm going to open up Photoshop. And you could use any photo editing tool that has brightness controls. Again, it's no monkey business involved with any of the image alteration here. It's just doing this. So I'm going to just basically create a new image, paste it from the clipboard. And I like to if I have to choose the layer, and if I go to the camera raw filter, which I have enabled in here, this gives me some pretty precise controls, and I can see stuff as here. So you can play with the highlights. You can see what the sliding scale for highlights does, exposure, contrast. So there's many ways you can do this to isolate different kinds of details. If you are wanting to look at different sites, you can adjust the blackness level of this. So all these sliders, there's no right way to show or present the data, but depending on your curiosity for really isolating different parts of the image or enhancing their visibility, because the raw photo does have some limits, apparently. I'm not an expert with the capabilities of the Chandrayaan-2 orbiter photography capabilities, but it really was not far from the surface when I took these pictures. When I have back the details of that, let's see, I did have on my site, I'm trying to remember, altitude of about 100 kilometers at a resolution of about 0.32 meters per pixel is the capability for that camera. So that's its normal mode that it's taking photos of the lunar surface on. So 100 kilometers up is not that far. And to be able to get an image of this quality, it's also got a pretty impressive high resolution camera on board. Possibly one of the highest resolution of any orbiter, I think. You can certainly correct me on that if I'm wrong, Scott. You would know.
No, you're absolutely right. It's got a better camera than LRO does, Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter.
So just the stunning amount of detail you can see here of the historical artifacts of the Apollo 12 site. I chose this one because I think it's a more interesting site to look at. Apollo 11, we'll flip to that quick as well, because that's the historic first site.
Marty, before you leave Apollo 12, as
Sure.
you probably know, there's an interesting artifact nearby, but I didn't want to mess up your presentation if in
Okay.
fact, yeah.
What's the artifact?
Yeah. Your call on that.
No, please go ahead. What's the artifact?
Oh, yes. The surveyor, they
Yeah.
laid nearby an earlier unmanned mission called Surveyor 3. I should just Google this instead of trying like a trivia contest here.
And someone did point that out to me online after I had posted my original images too. And I tried to, I should have documented, because I did find it. Based on photos taken of it's a little down in a crater, I think, below the ground level, because it was in a crater. And I was able to pan and research a bit more to locate that. And that was kind of a fun exercise too. I should redo that and document exactly the coordinates of that site as well in this data set. But I believe it's not too far away in this, see this little object here? I'm going to try to center on here where my cursor is, because I believe that, well, at least that's where my eyes first went when I was trying to find this, because they said it was not far at all. I believe it was just this next crater over. So I'm going to try.
Keep in mind, you can follow the footpaths, right? So they walked from the lunar module to Surveyor. And so
we can see, yeah, right. We can see a path going around here. I don't know which direction they went in, but again, I think this might be it, because there's a bright reflection there. And it's hard to center this tool, but I will do my best quickly, and then we can switch over to Apollo 11, because I think we've got time to explore a little bit of each of these sites. So now I'm going to try to go back in here. Again, it's a difficult tool to use, not like probably what you're used to browsing. Now, I believe it might be over here. It's not this white object. I believe it might be this over here. So let me just see the shadow, the tall mast, I believe, on Surveyor is showing possibly there, because there are footprints up to it. You can see the tracks now leading.
Oh, yep, that's it.
You can see it. So we can see tracks leading up to Surveyor. I'm going to zoom in again because I don't have another screenshot of this already saved on my site. And I'll zoom in a little bit, but it gets a little pixelated at this point. It's amazing that anything can take a picture of this resolution from 100 kilometers away.
Yep.
But there, we've got surveyor and shadow. So the time of day, I guess lunar surface wise, that these photos were taken were perfect, whether it was intentional or not, on the Indian Space Research Organization's part. The shadows really help a lot. You can imagine if the sunlight were directly overhead, there'd be no shadows. It would be much harder to understand and verify that this is actually a lander with a mast or the communications equipment on top. There are photos of that on the lunar surface, but I think what's fun here is this can be this photo from 2021 can be matched up to other publicly available images, and we can see the boot tracks. They must have followed a path because this is on the edge of a crater, and they couldn't just go straight in. And quite an interesting. But more curious to document. But it's just the crater to the lower right in this image set, not too far away when you're browsing. So they clearly walked around the crater to get to this point. So pretty fascinating that even that predates the Apollo 12 site.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
let's, you want to, should I do the same and go over to the Apollo 11 and browse around a little bit, see what we can see there?
Yeah, sure. I assume you use similar methods. So maybe, coming to the Apollo 11 result rather than having to start from scratch.
Yes, agreed. So I'll minimize some of these and go back to cancel out of these tools I use to browse to some of that. But I'll bring back up the site and looking at Apollo 11 so here we've got Apollo 11, and we've heard the stories of how Buzz was navigating at the last minute. Fuel was running on low, and he had quite a few things to avoid before landing. And we can see the hazards in this immediate vicinity are quite extreme. If I'm just on my site here, I can zoom in a little here just into the image on my webpage. But clear landing legs, detail, and fascinating things here. We don't see, or at least to my eye, I haven't seen quite as footprints or boot tracks the same way. They didn't. So I don't know what other artifacts may still be on the surface that are left behind or surveys. Something certainly not as many things as visible as in the Apollo 12 image, but still.
Yeah, different time of day there, it's possible the sun angle isn't as favorable for the footpaths.
Yeah, it's a pretty shallow. It looks like a more extreme angle on this one to Apollo 12, just based on the shadow is longer, I believe, on Apollo 11's image here than it was on 12. That's my own amateur opinion. So take that for what it is. Both landers are the same size. They could be oriented a little differently, but time of day does seem to be a little closer to sunset on the moon here. So again, a fascinating landing site for Apollo 11. And again, that was from April 12 of 2021. So we're talking, quite a ways after, on the fact that everything's still in the condition it was left because of the lack of any atmosphere on the moon. And it's a historical site as it is.
Indeed. And I
So,
wanted to discuss.
it's pretty fascinating. Go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, I was just going to say you brought up this historical aspect, and I definitely want to touch on that later on. But again, continue.
Sure. So again, the recreation of this, what I did, I tried to really, show step by step about how I did it, where to go to get the data, and make it easy. And again, at the very bottom of the page, where the coordinates are, more specifically, and I should add in surveyor to the Apollo 12 as well, just for anybody who's curious. That's a great one, and a great reminder for me to follow up and edit that. But again, we're looking at an image. The whole data set's 12 kilometers long by 3 kilometers wide, and at least, and just a fascinating tool to work with. And the fact that this data is publicly available from another competing space organization that is maturing at a pace and becoming a powerful organization in space exploration too is quite fascinating.
Yeah.
That an independent country of the U.S. is, and this is just one more layer of imagery that shows these landing sites exist on the moon,
Yeah.
albeit at high resolution than ever before.
Yeah, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you've done this on your own initiative. In fact, I thought it was a little uh, unfair. So many of these social media sites took your work and didn't give you credit. They like cropped
Oh,
off,
it's
yeah, they cropped off the part where it said,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
so
you can. Yeah, I'm a humble amateur astronomer. I'm not in this for fame or money. I love doing this. So of course, if I had any more concern, I would have put my credit right in the middle of the image, which would be been hard to crop out. But okay, yeah, in hindsight, but it was still fun. I mean, I've been quoted in, and the images have been quoted fairly. Again, I merely processed the image. This is the ISRO's efforts in their fantastic mission that have gotten this imagery. So I am a mere small byline in a much larger thing. I just am kind of showcasing how I did it, which may be initially very complex for a lot of people, but the fact that you can repeat this, and if you have a little patience for it, you almost feel like Galileo finding the land, the moons of Jupiter the first time. When I saw this and I zoomed in, I was excited that I found the lander sites right in the images.
yeah,
I
yeah.
wasn't the first to do it, but apparently my tutorial got a lot of traction, and certainly they published these in 2021. But for whatever reason, it didn't get as much traction until later. But again, that's just not my doing. I just had fun sharing it.
I have to say in 2021, as you said, I don't think they really paid much attention to it as far as like India news media. From what I saw,
Possibly.
it was just so as you said, it was taken in early April of that year. And then June, just 2 months later, it shows up in a video where they're talking about, hey, how great their orbiter high resolution camera is. And they say, here's the Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 sites. And it's just, there's no, nothing about, NASA's wonderful achievement. It's isn't our camera excellent kind of discussion. And
Well,
so,
what better way to show off the power of that camera than actually
exactly.
something that is built by humans on the moon? Because these craters, without reference point and seeing boot prints, and tracks, you don't have a good sense of scale. How
Exactly.
big is the crater? Well, if you didn't have the lander there, that crater could be a mile long in your mind, or a couple 100 feet, or even less. So its sense of scale is provided here, and just how fantastic this camera technology is that they've done, and how close it is to the surface at 100 kilometers up, orbiting is pretty interesting. I just think it's awesome.
Yeah, totally. And it also feeds into this topic of the whole evening we have here, which is India and their arrival of the United States, friendly in many ways, but you know, um, you know, were there. I really doubt that they would be carrying water for NASA's hoax if it were actually a hoax. But if you would, could you and I do a little brainstorming for a few minutes, a little devil's advocate, and
Sure.
try our best to push the hoax theory sincerely? I know that may sound distasteful. I personally find it so, but we might overcome our biases. And it's like, okay, now the Indian Space Research Organization is seeing these artifacts. How could these possibly have been anything else? Obviously, they have seen them for the first time since in 2021. So many years have gone by since 1969 when those two missions landed. But LRO saw the same things. A NASA spacecraft, Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, saw those same objects, not quite as clearly, but quite clearly, the same, just the same, back in 2009. So that's encouraging, where it's like, all right, there's consistency between different organizations. What do you
Yeah.
think? Could these have been landed on manned and then they had something rolling around autonomously to leave these tracks? And maybe it was done after 1969, maybe later. But how do you secretly get something to the moon without people in it and then fake footpaths? Or other equipment being set up nearby.
Yeah.
It,
It's
it,
I think about that a lot. I don't encounter a lot of this online, but the thought process I go through is that, we've seen, even just, people who claim that this is all staged in a theater or a studio somewhere. We've seen that computer generated imagery and graphics AI imagery is so just from a couple years ago is so obviously fake or easy to spot the inaccuracies of some of this imagery, whether it was staged or not, that just the last couple years we can see the maturity of graphics, let alone at this date in 1969. The historical artifacts that we see on the surface here with these images from another space organization's orbiter, compared to the photographs that astronauts took themselves.
right.
And there's Surveyor and the paths from Apollo 12 to the Surveyor. I've spent a little bit of time on that after, and everything lines up. Everything that ISRO took on the Apollo 12 site, where the Surveyor lander is that we just navigated to in the browser, and where they walked to, how they got to it, and the artifacts left behind. I mean, there's a shadow there that I think might be a flag. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I really need to investigate more of the public available photographs from Apollo 12 and Apollo 11 to compare to here, as well as other organizations that have lower res satellite imagery. But I just think that these sites, this is a kind of the best view we have of Apollo 11 and 12. And everything lines up with everything else we know about the landings uh, and the craters they had to avoid when landing, the site itself, where they went to from the descent module, um, and the science they did on the surface. So Apollo 12's imagery with the boot tracks in different directions gives us more of that than the Apollo 11 site imagery, but still just fantastic quality, and it corroborates everything else we know already.
Yeah, I agree. One of our participants has asked, "Hey, why is this black and white? Why not color?" And off the top of my head, I think that you can get more information in if it's a monochrome. Rather,
Yeah, and that's what I don't know. I do provide a little detail on my website about this OHRC, the optical high resolution camera, and I do provide a link to ISRO's website where they explain more about the camera's capabilities because how it takes pictures, really all the technical aspects of it, many of the details which go beyond my comprehension. But I know, and what I've seen from other planetary missions from NASA and others, I think a lot of monochromatic images with maybe different filters are used to, it's not the same kind of camera that you have in your iPhone or Android. It's a far different kind of setup that's more durable. But I need an expert in the planetary imaging field to really
yeah, me too.
talk to the benefits of why not color, um, and how could you get color from this, or could you even get color from this particular camera's capabilities?
Mhm. Um, I think you and I have made a good faith effort in terms of, okay, we're trying to, support the hoax theory as best we can. And now it's in a bit of trouble because ISRO, I mean, maybe the Indians have secretly made an agreement with the United States and there's some money involved or something, and that's why they're doing this. But looking to the future, by the way, real quick, before we went on the air here, you and I had discussed briefly the announcement from NASA headquarters earlier today, where the schedule is getting clearer in terms of humans returning to the moon for the first time since 1972. So Artemis 2 is scheduled for April 2026, so about a year and a half from now, purely an orbiting mission. Then Artemis 3 to take humans back to the surface of the moon, mid 2027. So it's like, well, if you didn't believe in the 1960s and 70s, we've got the 2020s coming for you in terms of human activity on the moon, and the Chinese space program is also planning that. And so anyway, and then perhaps the far future could be really interesting, and I wanted to bounce an idea off you on that. Space tourism, there's already a bit of that with people flying to high altitudes. Actor William Shatner was one of them some years ago in the Blue Origin spacecraft. But that someday space tourists will visit the moon and look up at Earth. And, we know what the moon looks like from Earth, and then put yourself on the other world looking up at Earth. It's 4 times the width of the moon. If you were looking at the moon from Earth, looking at Earth from the moon, just imagine in your mind, oh, it's 4 times wider and sitting up there in the sky. And it could be exciting things like watching eclipses from the moon's surface as Earth passes in front of the sun. And also to perhaps get close to these historic sites, as you said earlier in your talk. These really are historical sites, and I dug up some information about that. You may already be familiar with this, and I didn't want to, step on your
No, my hope is that when it's not a matter of if, I think it's just a matter of when, how far from now that space tourism reaches the moon, that they protect these sites or for future generations, and that they limit access to them, just like we have no drones over state national parks, things like that. These need to be protected sites.
That's right.
And they should prevent people from getting close to them, or certainly, undoubtedly, someone's going to ask, okay, now there's tourists on the moon. Somebody go walk over there and prove that they can see the Apollo 11 or 12 landing sites or any of the others. I need first person proof that they're there. At some point, I'm sure, it could be many years from now, that a mission will venture to those areas again. But the scientific interesting areas seem to be at the poles, where there's trapped water ice and craters that have never seen the light of day, and some other destinations. Not necessarily these already visited destinations, but maybe when it's certainly budgets need to be pretty big to just go there for fun and prove that the site still is there, and take a long range photo by not destroying boot prints that Buzz and Neil left. Someday someone will go again. And there's only going to be an introduction of more orbiters around the moon that probably have higher quality levels of cameras that will just further reinforce what we're seeing now, and further clarity and more angles. And the evidence is only going to keep mounting the more that humans focus on getting back to the moon.
My thought is about tourists with these historic landing sites. There might be tall towers, observation towers, so you can safely observe through telescope or binoculars from these tall towers, and that you can see the sites up close at a safe distance. I actually looked this up before tonight, so we could discuss it. It's the One Small Step to Protect Human Heritage in Space Act. So this became law in the United States 4 years ago. And I'll very quickly read excerpts of this. Congress makes the following findings. One of the elements here is the landing of the Apollo 11 spacecraft and humanity's first off-world footprints are achievements unparalleled in history, a direct product of the work and perseverance of the more than 400,000 individuals who contributed to the development of the Apollo missions, on the shoulders of centuries of science and engineering pioneers from all corners of the world. And it goes on in terms of these are the first archaeological sites with human activity that are not on Earth. Provide evidence of the first achievements of humankind in the realm of space travel and exploration and so on. So anyway, NASA has, don't come within 2 kilometers of the Apollo 11 or Apollo 17 lunar modules descent stages. And then, I'm sorry, that's the landing exclusion zone. And then
Okay.
the surrounding where you cannot get closer in any way is 75 meters for Apollo 11 and 225 meters for Apollo 17. But there are no such restrictions for Apollo 12, 14, 15, 16. So there are interesting, I was surprised about this, interesting
That surprises
scientific
me too.
questions visiting those sites, the non-protected ones. Um, yeah, 2 kilometers for landing.
Yeah,
When they came down near Surveyor and they returned some of the Surveyor equipment to Earth, it turned out that some of the material kicked up by the landing of Apollo 12 had pitted and otherwise damaged a Surveyor. So it was like, hey, if we want to protect these Apollo sites, you can't land closer than 2 kilometers away. And
that's
so anyway,
smart.
that was something I wanted to share with you. And um, your thoughts about the future of our descendants, maybe great grandchildren, might look, from towers at these sites, and it's like, oh, how cool these footprints
That is
will
a
be.
fantastic idea, and
Yeah,
it probably won't be in our lifetimes, but how far in the future would that be? But what a historical achievement to look back that far and say, hey, this is the first time our stepping stone off this planet, the first place that we landed somewhere else. And however many decades that happens from now, think of where we'll else have gone by then. Maybe the first humans ever arrived at Mars to explore for scientific and come back safely, hopefully. And but where else we can go from there is pretty not much else we can go. So we really need to protect these sites,
yes.
and
Um,
hopefully, that the economic reasons to visit the moon and will certainly they're looking for those things now and where water could be hiding and how that could help us manufacture rocket fuel to get to the next big place or location. Those all those the mining opportunities. So hopefully that they protect the rest of the Apollo sites too as part of this. That would be a nice natural extension. It's not just 11 and 17. All the others have historical significance too.
oh yes, although not protected in the same way
Yeah,
as 11 and
I didn't
17.
know that.
One of our participants, Paul Kaplowitz, wonders if you've seen the movie Fly Me to the Moon, the
It's on
comic.
my watch list. I haven't seen it yet.
All right, I won't do any spoilers. I will say I was happy with the movie until the last minute or so of the movie when they say something that's absolutely false.
Okay.
And so other than that, I would have clipped out that, from the last 30 seconds, and I won't mention what it is.
It's
By the
tough
way,
being a space enthusiast who really follows everything because you pick apart movies. That's not real. That's fake. There's
sure.
gravity would be there. Especially sci-fi. The gravity is the same on every planet they go to, and they can miraculously breathe oxygen on every location they go to. So it's hard being an enthusiast or an amateur astronomer and knowing a little too much but I still try to let the movie scene thrill me every time and not look too much into it.
Mhm. Someone that calls himself the Go Kid, 2Ds, thanks you for your photos here. And we also have some jokers in here and good-natured, I think, wondering if Stanley Kubrick is directing this Zoom call. Um,
No, I'm yeah, I'm in my downstairs. No one's here besides me. My wife's upstairs, and no one's directing me or telling me what to say. This is all my own doing. And you can follow me online on social media. I look up the sky on my own time and regard, and discover with my own eyes as I see stuff too. Of course, with a lot of knowledge and learning from everybody else who preceded me and us.
Cool. Let's see a couple other things that I mentioned about watching an eclipse from the moon's surface, so looking up and seeing Earth pass in front of the sun. And I did not realize this until today, but both Apollo 14 and 15, if they had stayed just a few more days, they would have seen an eclipse, as I've just
Oh, wow.
described. Can you imagine? And the sharp thermal effects is what caused them to say, let's not have our people on the ground while there's a few hundred-degree Fahrenheit change over a matter of just a few hours.
Wow. I
Otherwise,
can imagine.
I didn't realize this until today either. The LRO project scientist told me that the Apollo 15 camera was working for a while after they left, and it's like, oh, maybe it will show us the eclipse, from the surface. But unfortunately, it overheated.
Oh, no.
Otherwise, it would have had that wonderful thing. And also, as the Apollo 15 crew was returning to Earth, they had a unique vantage point because they were watching the eclipse, the moon passing through Earth's shadow, but they weren't in Earth's shadow, unlike every human that's ever watched a lunar eclipse. They were, looping back sort of on the side, if you will, forgive my non NASA terminology here, looking back at Earth, I'm sorry, at the moon from the side. So it was an interesting perspective, but not as spectacular as watching from the surface of the moon, where, it's, all the sunrises and sunsets are visible from around the edge of Earth, and that's why the moon looks red.
I love that description.
Yeah.
It's just all the sunrises and sunsets visible during a lunar eclipse. It's when it looks that deep red, fascinating point of view.
Right. Yeah, and also there are occasions where the moon doesn't turn red. It's just very dark, very hard to see it, and that usually will happen if there's been a large volcanic eruption in the months or years ahead of the eclipse, and the dust is in the upper atmosphere and blocks more of the sunlight. So you just have this very, I've seen this before. Was it 1982? Where it's like, wow, where is the moon? You can't see it because the atmosphere it just isn't clear enough to let the sunlight pass around the horizon. And but anyway, yeah, when we have beautiful sunsets on Earth as a result of a volcanic eruption, these beautiful sunsets, it makes eclipses boring on the moon, and our descendants will have to just live with that, I think. Um, let's see. Let me check on other. Uh, here, a question posed to you. Is there a moon movie that you like that you thought was quite accurate? One comes to mind for me immediately. And also a fun moon movie, regardless of accuracy. Do you have a
That's a
perspective
good
on
one.
that?
I think the Apple TV series is one that has interested me. It's For All Mankind. That was a
Oh,
fun
yes.
and engaging one that I've had fun watching. It's a little different timeline or more far-fetched, a whole different kind of multiverse kind of thing. What would things have been? That was interesting. Certainly, I think the first one, the Apollo 13 movie with I forget, from the 90s maybe. That was fascinating with the mission that didn't make it to the moon, and just what everybody had to do to get them home safely. That was a fairly realistic and good one.
Yeah.
Even though they didn't get to the moon, I like that one in particular
Yeah,
too.
one of my favorites as well. And of course, 2001: A Space Odyssey, although they didn't simulate the low gravity environment. The television series several years later, Space 1999, did better with that using wires when filming, the moonwalking in that TV series. But those are some of my favorites as well. Apollo 13, I'll be honest with you, and we have a big thing that we need to change on board the spacecraft. My specialty is what's called flight software engineering. Think of it as brain surgery for the brain of the robot. I watched the night before, I watched Apollo 13 to kind of get my psyche in the right place and be ready for anything. And it's just a really good capture of how at NASA, the problem solving and, the innovation and reacting, having backup plans and things like that. It's a really great capture of that in an artistic way.
Yeah, definitely.
So my hope is that in the future we'll have far fewer moon landing deniers because they'll be able to visit the moon. And then they might say, well, this was put there autonomously without a crew, and they faked the moon footprints. But at some point you have to let people believe what they're going to believe, even if it seems
Sure.
absurd. But I think in the future there will be fewer such believer or deniers, I should say, because they'll be able to go there and see for themselves. And I think the same will apply to the flat earthers. In fact, I wanted to touch on that briefly, although it's
Sure.
off topic. And that is with the um, next month, Mars will be at opposition. So it'll be unusually close to Earth, and it's an exciting time for amateur astronomers because you're going to get your best view of the planet as compared to the rest of every 2 years, roughly, the moon, Mars passes as close as it does to Earth. Anyway, it also means that Mars is up all night. It rises at sunset and it sets at sunrise. And it seems to me a flat Earth person, if anyone knows a flat Earth person, you get a nice telescope and you have them look at Mars at Mars rise, and then look at it again an hour later and so forth, all through the night, roughly 12 hours. And you'll see the entire surface of Mars as it rotates, because it takes
Right.
about 24 hours to rotate. So the entire surface over the course of that night will be visible to the flat earther. And then it's like, okay, you've just watched this other planet rotate. What is your interpretation of what you saw? And so I'd be interested. I don't know if anyone has done that with
Yeah.
the
Amateur
best
ast
flat earthers, I guess is what I would call them, the
Yeah.
smartest, whatever.
In that
And
example, amateur astrophotographers or professional astrophotographers who are very skilled have taken whether it's Jupiter or Mars, kind of a long duration animation of the planet rotating in view as they track it across the sky. It's difficult and takes some pretty advanced and expensive telescope equipment and imaging, but it has been done.
Mhm.
There's several astrophotographers that come to mind that have done that for Jupiter to show Jupiter rotates much quicker than Mars. And you can see the great red spot going across view, and even the four largest moons out of the many dozens of moons that Jupiter has rotating within view in front and leaving shadows across the planet itself. So there's really some fantastic stuff out there that amateurs do from their backyards wherever they are.
Mhm.
This is just for fun because they can.
Mhm. Um, my hope is, by the way, that someday there'll be an automated telescope on the moon pointed at Earth, and it'll have a live stream of the view back to us. So anytime we can look at the Earth as seen from somewhere on the near side of the moon, the side that always faces Earth. And we sort of have a similar thing with the Deep Space Climate Observatory, looking at Earth from the sun's perspective, a million miles from Earth. But
Right.
that's just every couple hours, I think, they take an image. But I'd love to have a live stream from the moon's surface of Earth. And again, I don't know what the flat earthers will say. And I was going to quote, I jotted down, oh, yes. Where was this?
And there is a live view of the International or of Earth from the International Space Station as well. They have a live camera, depending on
Beautiful. Yes. High
when
res.
the camera is within range. I just checked it now. The live stream recording is not available, but it comes, if you check back on that page from time to time, it will actually show you the map of where it is, and then also what's the live view looking straight down. So there's multiple imagery resources for that, and that actually have that linked on my homepage.
Mhm.
Down towards the bottom, I have a NASA link section. One of them is live view of Earth from the International Space Station. So that's one I love to bring up in my talks and presentations, just for say, hey, who wants to see the Earth right now? Hopefully it's within range and it's working and it matches the apps, let's say where the space station currently is. And within luck, you can recognize the geography that it's looking at too.
Yeah, that would be neat if it just happens to be passing over, say, Bethlehem area while
Well,
you're
hey, I'm an avid space station watcher, and I've actually gotten
doing,
telescopic images of the space station with solar panels from my backyard,
yeah, same.
manually tracked with my huge telescope. It's a pain in the butt, but it's, boy, that's rewarding to know that, okay, 300 miles up, I snagged it. I got a picture.
Yeah. There can't be space station deniers, right? They would look in that telescope as you have, and it's like, yeah, there's something enormous there. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because you can see it small, getting larger when it's overhead. When the orbit happens to pass right over you, it's brighter and larger diameter as it's passing because it's closer to you. And then as it passes further, it grows more distant from you and smaller in view. So again,
Yeah.
it's orbiting Earth, and your vantage point changes based on its proximity to you at your fixed point on the surface. So I get images when it's approaching over the horizon, very far away. And then when it's 300, 350 miles overhead, and then when it's maybe 1,000 miles downrange from my standpoint. So pretty interesting stuff. And it all, it's orbiting us.
Yeah. And when it goes into Earth shadow, it almost reminds me of like in Star Trek when the cloaking device on a Romulan
Yes.
ship, because it fades out. And of course, it's
No more
still
sunlight
there.
to keep it
Just
visible.
Yep, it's just not in sunlight anymore. I wanted to quote one of the Apollo astronauts, one of the 12 men that walked on the moon. He said, if people decide they're going to deny the facts of history and the facts of science and technology, there's not much you can do with them. For most of them, I just feel sorry that we failed in their education, unquote. And, you know, again, tonight, you've shown your evidence, and I think it's a big step forward. I won't say a giant leap because it's a terrible pun. I guess I already did, but it's just a wonderful thing that, on your own initiative, looking through this and finally it's like, wow, these are actually the best images since 1969 of these locations. And it's from another country. And it just makes it really, really unlikely that NASA hoaxed this and that ISRO is in on the hoax. It's absurd more than ever. I will say, in fairness to the conspiracy people, Apollo did happen during the time of Vietnam and Watergate. And so it's like, well, is our government lying to us about these other things? But in this case, I think we can, I know we can say with complete confidence that this really did happen as intended. Um, I had another thought too, if that's all right, and that is
Sure.
in a way, this always happens with humanity when something astounding has been accomplished, something that just is far beyond what the culture seems, the civilization seems capable of. And I think immediately of the Great Pyramids, right? So if we could communicate with the designers and builders of the Great Pyramids and tell them, maybe in a seance, I'm kidding to my fellow skeptics, but for my point here, if we could communicate with them and say to them, hey, did you know that some people in your far future, our time, think that you didn't design and build your pyramids, that space aliens built them? I'm pretty sure they'd feel the same way as any of the 400,000 people who were part of the Apollo program feel when it's like, oh, you didn't actually do this. And even in the arts, there are people who think Shakespeare didn't do all these plays, or that it's multiple people and so on. And then I have a guess, maybe in our own time, the Beatles, an incredible staying power and their popularity, and so different of their as compared to the rest of their time. I wonder if that will come under suspicion in decades or centuries from now. Maybe their record producer, George Martin, or others will be given credit for Lennon and McCartney compositions. How could the songwriters of I Want to Hold Your Hand really have written A Day in the Life or Hey Jude just a few years later? So it's not just with NASA and reaching the moon. It's Shakespeare. It's the Beatles, maybe, where it's like, hey, it really did happen, folks. There are times when humanity is extraordinary, and you know, I'm so grateful to you for your helping establish the truth. We always care about the truth, and so.
Well, glad to be a small part of it. It's just exciting for me to be part of my own discoveries, whether it's doing things like this or looking up in the night sky and seeing something else in the night sky for the first time for myself, whether it's a total eclipse, which I got to experience this year. I didn't even have to leave my house to see the northern lights in southeastern Pennsylvania. That's
Yeah,
amazing. So this has been quite a year for a lot of things.
incredible.
And I keep adding them to my list of checked it off now. I have done it. I don't have to go to Iceland or northern Canada to see the northern lights. I'm sure it's much more spectacular
Well,
than
that's
Bethlehem,
just it.
Pennsylvania.
I was going to catch you there because the curtains and so on. I think you do have to do an Iceland kind of
I
thing.
still do. Yeah. They weren't bright enough for my taste, but I saw them and they're at least partially checked off the list.
Yeah. By the way, where did you go for the April total eclipse of the sun?
I ended up in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. I was
Oh,
planning to drive as far as Indiana or up into Canada, but weather likelihood for best chances, I ended up in Tupper Lake, New York, and joined an amazing um, festival they had there for the eclipse at the
uh-huh.
Tupper Lake area. Just beautiful, and it was a beautiful time with a couple thousand people. So totally amazing. Slept in my
I'm
car,
glad you
but it
weren't.
was it was fantastic.
I'm glad you weren't clouded out because I know some people up in New York hopelessly clouded.
Got
But
lucky.
excellent, excellent. By the way, you were speaking of the fantastic astronomy of 2024. If you would, we discussed this before your talk today. A comment.
Sure.
Yes.
Let me bring it up here. This is the comet as I saw it rising or after sunset on October 13th of this year at around 7:26 p.m. Eastern time. Um, and I had my newer telescope that I could track automatically a little bit and get some photos. But yeah, so this was a fun one. This I might have actually gotten this. I think was actually my Canon 60D camera on a tripod to get this kind of a view. Again, not too long after sunset at that time, so still some daylight, but you can see some star trails up here. And again, this is a multi, maybe I forget how long this was, either maybe a 30-second exposure or less, but just to get some faint tail in here. Again, not the best comet picture ever, but it's mine. And again, another one of my bucket list items. It's the second comet I've seen. So I keep adding to my collection.
Mhm. Chuchichan Atlas is the mouthful name here of the two observatories that discovered it. And yeah, when I saw it, 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 it reminded me of a ghost that came for Halloween a couple weeks early. Let's see, your date there was October 13th. So it very much, I'll associate it with Halloween, although its peak
Yeah,
was.
that was a fascinating one to get. So it was fun, and yeah.
If you would tell me about your Solar System Ambassadors program, this is why you're so good at what you do in your volunteer work. Would you describe that?
Sure. The NASA Solar System Ambassador Program, it's a public engagement effort by NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California. And there are currently about 1,200 volunteer ambassadors like myself in all walks of life and skill sets. I'm not a scientist or engineer. I'm a business professional by day and just a curious amateur astronomer by night, and love uh, airplanes and space travel and space exploration. So this allows me to carry my enthusiasm to my local community. I have a couple talks a year, different libraries. A co-founder with another ambassador, Todd Sullivan from the Easton area in Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
He's the founder of Lehigh Valley Space Fest. So we're just finding lots of interesting ways to bring the community more space news and topics, and people with lots of questions, kids, young and old, and adults alike, who are just curious and maybe never had the opportunity to learn more about this and ask questions of subject matter experts and other people we bring in. So it's a fantastic time because it's so much fun to learn about, and NASA is a cool brand and has been for a long time. And it's I've had the chance to meet a couple of astronauts in my NASA travels, and just it's exciting for me. I feel like a kid every time I talk about it with others. So again, it's bringing the passion and excitement to other people about such an exciting topic of space exploration. I mean, we're doing things for humankind that have never been done before, and the search for learning more and more about our place in the universe is a pretty monumental thing. And my passion is looking up at the night sky and wondering those big questions myself. So
Mhm.
that's why I do
Um,
it.
would you describe you got training to do this, isn't that right?
Yeah, so NASA JPL supports us with webinars and phone conferences with subject matter experts on multitudes of topics throughout the year. So we get to talk to people from the missions themselves, engineers and scientists behind, whether it's Mars rovers or the Webb Space Telescope, or you name it. There's many topics that we get not insider information on, but we get direct access to folks who are on those teams. And we get to learn more and learn some of the cool facts and reasons these missions are being funded and the exploration goals for them, whether it's Earth-based science or solar system exploration, or life aboard the International Space Station and everything they're doing there. So um, we get resources and support in that way that we can then take in turn what we've learned and bring it to our local communities.
Mhm. I'll put a plug in here. A friend of mine, former coworker Daryl Cook, she is a solar system ambassador down here in Maryland, and I've been to one of her events, and again, it's very similar to what we've experienced here tonight with you. Really good connection with the layperson audience, especially youngsters, but also people of all ages, to be able to share in your excitement about human exploration. Um, Let's see. Oh, that was the other thing. I think it's in September that applications, if anybody wants to become a volunteer, I don't know if maybe there are restrictions now?
Yeah, I
Obviously,
can talk a little bit about that, but
yes,
if you mind, I could share my screen and actually show people where to go for this, if you'd like.
excellent. That would be wonderful.
Okay, so on my webpage at backyardastronomyguy.com, I've got a link to the Solar System Ambassador Program.
Yeah.
But when you click Learn More, it basically, we're going to go out to solarsystem.nasa.gov. And from their new site, in the More menu, so if you just, solar system exploration at science.nasa.gov or solar system, there's, this link up top. You can navigate into the Solar System Ambassador Program and learn more about it. And the application period, if you click on apply, opens up each September. You do have to be a U.S. citizen living in the U.S. or abroad, or a green card holder and at least 18 or older. There are some young ambassadors and some that are old, all walks of life. So it's a fascinating group of people. But September 1 through 30 is when they accept those applications each year. And we report each of our events with how many people we reached. So to date, the program has reached almost close to 14 million people in person throughout the history of the program, which is well over 20 years now. So it's a fascinating program. I joined in 2017, and it's just been a really exciting part because, I'm even basic old me is listed on the site, and the fact that I'm on a NASA website is pretty cool. And here I am. My ambassador page is here, and people can contact me locally for an event, and a little bit more about me is there. But you can browse all the events that are available throughout the Solar System Ambassador Program. What's coming up near you? You can search for your town, and see where free public events are from other ambassadors all across the country. So really check it out. It's a lot of fun.
Cool. I recognized your headshot as being down at the Wallops Flight Facility on the eastern shore of Virginia, where various rockets go up, including a cargo vehicle to the space station. I think they're going to start, is it next year? Resuming those Antares flights. But anyway, I've enjoyed those launches as well. It looks like you had a great visit there. Got very
I
close.
did. It was a NASA social event. They have some NASA social events you can apply to join as a media influencer or somebody who's not even. So if you search for NASA social, anybody from any walk of life can apply to be in a select group of maybe 30, 40 people that get behind the scenes tours of specific NASA locations. And in return, you talk about it to your online audiences and spread the word about what you've learned to maybe new audiences that wouldn't have had access to that NASA news, or they're always looking to expand who they're educating about the purpose behind NASA for both Earth and space-based science.
Nice. By the way, I've done volunteer work, public outreach for NASA, although not in this program. You clearly have excellent resources there for you. But I will say this to my fellow skeptics, that public outreach with science or a star party, watching through telescopes is a great bridge to the public, because two topics will come up. One is, hey, do you think UFOs are alien, extraterrestrial? And then the other is the moon hoax. And those are both great ways to connect about, hey, critical thinking and scientific method and so on, because people are excited about the possibility, hey, maybe aliens have visited. And so anyway, those are two ways to connect with the public about skepticism. And anyway, Marty, I'd never met you before tonight, but I clicked with you immediately, and obviously we are both in love with NASA and space exploration. I'm so glad I got to meet you, and thank you so much for your volunteer service. That's sort of a weird way of putting it, but I thank
That's
you
what
for
it
your
is.
service. It's a really wonderful thing for our scientists and explorers of the future are going to be reached by you and your colleagues, and it's just a wonderful thing. I'm going to
Well,
look at
thanks for having me on. I really appreciate being here tonight.
yeah, yeah, it looks like I don't think we have any. We have some comments, some good jokes, but we can look at those in the comments later. By the way, I will post some of this information in the comments section in case people want to look up. Hey, what is this about protecting the Apollo 11 and 17 landing sites and so forth?
Great.
So, well. Good night to you and anyone that's listening in. And if it's a sunset or so, you can go out and see the moon tonight. It's not terribly far from Venus in the sky, not like last night, which was really beautiful. I heard it was clouded here. But anyway, enjoy the night sky, enjoy the moon and our exploration of it in the years to come. Marty, I'll say thank you again, and also to our producer, JD Mack. Thank you so much. And oh, I don't want to forget backyardastronomyguy.com is our speaker's website. Go in and have a look as he showed the solar system ambassador program and his photos and other interesting things. And I'm going to sign off on behalf of the National Capital Area Skeptics, signing off from Greenbelt, Maryland. Enjoy the holiday season. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.